Another day, another Korean monitor. This time, it's the Crossover 1800R, which at the time of this video is a brand new monitor. 2017 Cobalt adorns the box. This is a 34-inch ultra-wide. It means it's, 3440 by 1440p. It's curved. It's got a white finish on the back, sort of a silvery metallic and black plastic bezel. It is a really small bezel. It's got a really small bezel on the outside, but really the diffusion filter masks how big the bezel actually is in reality, but it is a pretty small bezel. Now this is a Korean brand, it's a crossover brand, so depending on where you are, you may or may not be able to import these. Generally though, the Korean brands are 90 to 95% as good as a monitor that you can pick up locally. Usually there's some minor problem with maybe the panel that went into the display or something like that, although not always. And you can usually get it at 50 to 70% of the cost locally, at least for an equivalent panel. This is no exception. This arrived defect free in terms of bad pixels. The backlight bleed, it had a little bit of bleed in one corner, which I think is probably what happened with the display. But honestly, the backlight bleed was not really that bad. I was able to sort of fiddle with the menu and adjust it. Now these do come in the Korean language with the on-screen display, but you can change that to English, as I did. You just have to go to the appropriate menu and pick English. Not really a big deal. In terms of inputs, this has one dual-link DVI, one HDMI 2.0, and one DVI 1.2. So you can run this thing up to 100 Hertz. And out of the box, the EDID does support 100 Hertz. We did the high-speed footage testing with UFO and the high-speed camera, and there's no frame skipping at 100 Hertz, which is pretty awesome. Now, if you overclock it, you start to run into bandwidth issues with DisplayPort 1.2 because 3440 by 1440, so take that for a grain of salt. You can run it at a lower resolution. I was able to overclock it to 120 Hertz at a lower resolution than 3440 by 1440, and that worked. So I was pretty impressed with that, but your mileage may vary when you're overclocking, so don't count on the overclock. But out of the box, 100 Hertz support, yes, absolutely. In terms of like gray to gray time or anything like that, again, the high-speed footage is useful because, hey, the Samsung specs on that U28D 590D that I bought so many years ago is like 1 millisecond gray to gray. Lies, it's all lies. So we have to look at it on the camera and see actually how it does. What's black to black, gray to gray, white to white. We've also got the Leo Bodnar, yes, the Latency Analyzer. So with this, I was a little disappointed. The time that it takes from the time that the frame is ready on the graphics card till the monitor starts displaying it is about 24 milliseconds. That's pretty middle of the road for the Korean monitors. Some of the larger Korean monitors, especially the 40-inch monitors out of the box, can even be slower than that. You have to go in and turn bypass on and do that kind of thing. Fiddling with it in the menus, we were able to get it as low as like 25, 26 milliseconds. The out of the box configuration was more like 30 milliseconds, 32 milliseconds, 36 milliseconds, something like that. From the time that it starts, it gets the frame on the graphics card to the time it starts to draw the frame at the top of the monitor is a little slow in my opinion. But if you go in the menus, you turn bypass on, you can get it down to 26 milliseconds. Hopefully we'll see monitors in the future that are even faster than that. I know like the Pixio monitors, for example, are much faster than that. The latency on those is about 6 milliseconds. 1/60th of a second is 16 milliseconds, so 60 Hertz, 1/16th of a second, 16 milliseconds. So it's a little bit more than 1/60th of a second from the time the frame is ready on the graphics card to the time the monitor starts displaying. Of course, your gaming television and things like that, that'll be on the order of 100 to 120 milliseconds, so it's definitely not the end of the world. All in all, it works pretty good. The other thing is the spider. So we do the spider testing, the color calibration. Spoiler alert, 99% of sRGB, about 80-85% of the Adobe RGB and the other RGB color space. So again, not the worst, not the best, but 99% sRGB. Pretty good for a Korean monitor, really. The color calibration profile for this monitor, at least this particular monitor, is loaded on the Level 1 Tech's website. So if you pick up one of these monitors, you can download that color calibration profile to use it as a starting point. In terms of fit and finish and build, they've retooled the stand, the crossover. It's got sort of the alien-looking tripod thing. This one's been updated. It is aluminum. It's sort of a hammered, sandblasted, somewhere between sandblasting and hammering because it's got a lot more of a texture. Aluminum stand, only 4 screws, 2 in the back and 2 on the bottom. Comes with the rubber feet pre-installed. The screws are in the bag with the DisplayPort cable, the HDMI cable, and the European style power cable. But it was a really easy installation. It is VESA compatible, although it's a little weird because the VESA connector is at an angle. So you got to unscrew the plastic from the VESA connector and mount it that way. But it is doable. Well, a 75mm VESA mount, but it's not a totally standard VESA mount. So bear that in mind if you are going to try to deal with this in a VESA situation. That, like with the Spaceco, like the Spaceco quick release would probably be no problem, but like the Spaceco flat plate VESA mount might be a little more problematic with this particular VESA layout on this monitor. Otherwise, in terms of fit and finish, it's pretty good. It is a little bit glossy, so this is, as opposed to being like ultra matte, this is somewhat matte. This is maybe a semi-gloss. I don't know. We should come up with a rating system of monitors from like mirror finish to Vanta black, I guess. And so this monitor is somewhere in the middle. It is not super reflective, but it is more reflective than the previous crossover that I reviewed in terms of the matte finish on the display. It is a little bit more reflective, but it's at least not as glossy. Remember like the iMac, like the 27-inch iMac? So those are mirror finish. Those were not good. This is not that, so that's good at least. So it's time for the subjective portion of the review. How is it actually playing games? So I got to play PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds and some other, well, I would say that Battlegrounds is basically a Twitch shooter. I mean, for me it is, pretty much. It was a very enjoyable experience. It was using FreeSync Vega 64 on our Gigabyte Aorus X299 motherboard with our i9 10 core. We've got 64 gigabytes with the G.Skill Trident Z memory in this system. It's a really fast system. I mean, it's really, really good. We got it in the Fractal Meshify case. In case you haven't seen the Meshify, you can check out our review on that. So Battlegrounds runs really well on this system, especially with the high bandwidth cache turned on, which is sort of a performance thing that you can do with Battlegrounds. And so FreeSync, let me tell you, really nice. The FreeSync range on this monitor is 42 to 100 hertz, and I was able to maintain, like 45 to 55 FPS with this particular setup, and the FreeSync really makes a big difference in Battlegrounds, so that worked out pretty well. Also tested a really high FPS game, Doom run like 200 FPS flat out. Messing around with that, basically Doom was okay as well. So I didn't notice any, like sometimes you get FreeSync and FreeSync doesn't exactly work as advertised on all monitors. Subjectively, I didn't notice anything weird playing games with FreeSync enabled on this monitor. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the FreeSync implementation based on about 30-45 minutes of gameplay. All in all, it's a pretty solid monitor from Korea. It's really, the value is going to come down to price. What can you pick up the monitor for locally? What's the exchange rate? Do the comparison shopping to see what your other options are for ultra-wides. I've actually been doing ultra-wide gaming on the previous model crossover for the last 4 or 5 weeks, and I'm finding that I really enjoy ultra-wide gaming, at least with the games that support it properly. Don't get me wrong, I am totally a 40-inch 4K person for productivity, but for games, that's maybe asking a little bit much to push that much resolution for games. The widescreen aspect ratio, actually, is pretty nice for gaming. I'm not going to give up my 40-inch 4K anytime soon, but I do actually kind of enjoy gaming with the widescreen aspect ratio. It's sort of the right balance of giving you really good performance because you don't have as many pixels as 3440 by 1440 as you do with 3840 by 2160 on a true 16 by 9 aspect ratio screen. But it's a little easier for 1080 Ti, Vega 56 and Vega 64 to deal with. So your mileage may vary. That about wraps it up. Hopefully this has been the most succinct and to the point monitor review ever. I've got quite the collection of monitors in my quest to find, the perfect monitor that's not insanely expensive. I mean, if you want to spend a bunch of money, you can, yeah, but let's not actually do that. So in my quest to find the perfect monitor, I think it's almost time to have a monitor roundup. Maybe we can do 16 by 9 monitors, wide aspect monitors. I've got the Pixios, I've got some other crossovers, and some other Korean brands here. And let's hook up the Leo Bodnar and the color calibration thing. Maybe we can do a monitor roundup and find the best monitors for the buck. I think that might be an interesting video. If you think so too, let me know in the description. I'm Wendell, I'm signing out, and you can find me in the Level 1 Text forums. I'll see you there.